Hello, welcome to the Healthy Alternatives podcast. I am Dr. Christine Sauer with DocChristine.com. Today's show is a recording of my radio show of the same name. Enjoy! Good afternoon, this is Dr. Christine Sauer, your host of the show Healthy Alternatives, here on 97.5 CIOE-FM with live stream on communityradio.ca. every Thursday at 12 noon Atlantic Standard Time. Thanks for tuning in today. In this show, I will talk mostly with guests about all aspects of health, healthcare and wellness, from conventional to alternative and everything in between. My mission for this radio show is to help change people's lives for the better by informing them about different options to get and stay healthy and well, so they can choose for themselves which option might work in their case. And if you feel you are stuck in a dark place, I want to tell you, don't give up. There is a light at the end of the tunnel for you too. Today I'm extremely pleased to be with Connor Young. He's the founder of Ample Foods and another great soul passionate about health, nutrition and fitness. Welcome, Connor.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. So the way I do it usually, the first half is tell me a little bit about who you are, where you grew up, and how the heck did you get to do what you're doing now?
Sure. You know, I guess I've been interested in health and nutrition for basically my whole life. It started when I was in middle school. I think when I just played sports just for the heck of it. And then in high school, I was always kind of like the skinniest guy, and so I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna need to not be skinny. So I got into the weight room, and when I realized how much my nutrition affected, my performance in the weight room, I got into nutrition. Mm-hmm. At the same time, my biology class was the most exciting class that I possibly could have had. So at that point, I was like, all right, I think that there's really two main problems in the world that I feel passionate about and could potentially help. One was people's lack of health, and second was the environment. And so I ended up going to college for degrees in biology and a minor in environmental science. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in Minnesota, and so it was cool when I first got to college. I actually got kind of bit by the CrossFit bug, and so I started basically evangelizing about how amazing CrossFit was, and at that point as well, I got into the paleo diet. Uh-huh. And so for the next few years, I was pretty strict paleo and was just a hardcore CrossFit athlete. It was probably pretty annoying for most of my friends to hear me only talk about CrossFit. So
I hear you. My own son is into CrossFit and eats paleo. So
oh yeah, and so after college, I started a CrossFit gym, and that was in Nashville, Tennessee. And it was frankly ridiculously gratifying to kind of see there were people who, they would make massive lifestyle changes and personal growth. And, yes, it was partly a physical change, but also to kind of see someone transform like mentally and emotionally, and to feel, so much more powerful and resilient. Mm-hmm. That was really fantastic to see. At the same time, I knew that I wanted to not just do a CrossFit gym. And so I sold the gym and actually sold medical devices for a couple of years through Johnson & Johnson, because I wanted to kind of see what the conventional health system looked like from the inside. And, it was, so, I would go into the operating room and teach surgeons how to use the devices. And, on one level it was kind of cool. At the other level it was, it was a little bit depressing to see that, 90% of these cases that were being done likely wouldn't have needed to happen if the patient had better lifestyle habits beforehand.
That is so true.
It was kind of was kind of depressing to see that like we're spending so many resources on something that is effectively a preventable problem. So I quit that and started a physical therapy patient engagement platform. Basically, my attempt at preventative wellness instead, and that brought me out to San Francisco. That particular company failed, and what was interesting though was to see though that although there wasn't as much demand for our product specifically, it was probably more just because of the fact that there was not as much of a business model in the conventional health system, and it was really hard to kind of teach or to sell something that actually did benefit patients but didn't really improve the bottom line. So I wanted to kind of start a business that did where the beneficiary of the product and the customer was the same person, which does not happen in the medical system basically at all. Because there's just it's just very convoluted.
At least not financially. Ideally, the patient will benefit by getting well, but as you say, in the conventional medicine, and I know that too as a conventional doctor as well as a naturopath, I see it from both sides, and a nutrition coach and a brain and health coach. I see it from all sides, and you're completely right. Many, many, many diseases nowadays would be preventable if they just would do the right thing. And I love that you say you did a business and you failed, because failure is an important part of becoming a better business person, a better person too.
Oh, definitely. I'm so grateful that it failed, not only for the lessons, but also to kind of clear the way for Ample, which I do feel, 10 times more passionate about, and it feels like a more kind of authentic extension of me, which is really, really important. So when I moved to San Francisco, I found myself in effectively the presence of a bunch of other entrepreneurs and people who were all wanting to do. They were all wanting to do big things in their lives, but one of the problems was they didn't really know how, and so they knew that nutrition and health were important in their lives, but they didn't know how to prioritize it within their busy lives. So I did nutrition coaching and actually a lecture series for these guys. But at the end of the day, they realized, it just takes too much work. We just don't have time for this. And, unless you have a lot of motivation, it takes a decent amount of, mental bandwidth and time to kind of really prioritize this in your life. So they asked me, okay, well, what are the products that can basically make this thing really easy for us? And I was like, I cannot recommend any. I really don't trust most of the food industry because most of the food industry, even healthy products are more just health marketing rather than true health, and where it's they're mostly marketing driven to the extent that you'd look at a market and then you'd say, okay, well, what's the minimum healthy thing that we can market about our current products to make a profit? And, in that sense, it's kind of depressing because you realize that they're not actually going after health, they're going after, marketing.
Yeah, that's very often the case. There's a few exceptions, but I generally agree. But there's fitness bars or protein bars are often full of sugar and all that. Now, how did you come up with Ample Foods? Sure.
Well, I think the goal was to say, let's start with nutrition and let's start with, kind of a fundamental approach. And so, for me, I kind of started from this idea of, okay, we're going to have, a full meal. So this is a meal replacement. And I do not look at that as a 4-letter word. I think that there's that even that term has a stigma, and it has a stigma for a reason, because most meal replacements have really been pretty crappy products in the past from a health perspective. But I said, okay, well, what if we were to kind of redefine that word to say it doesn't have to inherently bad, be bad, and instead we could make a really good one. And so from that, what would you need? And so what you would need is, some portion of all of your macronutrients that come from, good, high quality real foods. Including things like fiber, which are very absent in most. You'd also want, probably some greens, and you might also want to support your gut microbiome as well. So That's why we added probiotics. So, in general, you'd want to reduce or eliminate as much of the kind of excess sugar as you could, and while still having it taste good. And at the end of the day as well, what you'd probably want to have is a few different versions that aligned with different nutritional preferences. Because one of the other things that I believe is that there's no real one-size-fits-all to nutrition. Some people do some, slightly differently, different nutrition. And, I would say that there's probably some core principles that make sense for basically everyone. But in terms of macronutrient ratio, do you want to go keto, or do you want to have carbs in your product? Whatever. And in which case, let's just make a variety of these products such that the person who kind of feels that, hey, a keto lifestyle is for them, or a plant-based lifestyle is for them, or something where it's a little bit more high protein, we have the options for those. So basically, that's kind of what we've done. We've created a full meal in a bottle, and it does have the protein. All of them are relatively high in fat and relatively low in carbs, although not all of them are truly keto. They're all relatively high in fiber, and then they have greens and probiotics as well. Mm-hmm. And they're really used for the person who's not trying to replace all food in their life, of course. Mm-hmm. They're simply trying to say, well, at times I can't get the healthy food that I want, from whole food sources. So if I'm gonna have packaged food, or if I'm gonna have quick, convenient food, I might as well have a really high quality version of that.
Exactly.
And so that's what we've made. It's pretty, and so we launched it about 2 years ago, and it's been going pretty well since.
Connor, that's wonderful. And you mentioned the core principles that go in your products, and I would love to discuss those further in the second half, because now this is the end of the first half. Thank you so much here on 97.5 CRE-FM Community Radio. Please tune in after the commercial break for more about nutrition in a bottle with Connor Young. Thank you. Hello and welcome back to Healthy Alternatives here on 97.5 CIOE-FM or on the web at communityradio.ca. I'm your host, Dr. Christine Sauer, and today I'm talking with Connor Young, founder of Ample Foods. And in the first half, we talked a little bit of his story, how he actually noticed that people don't have healthy meal replacements or healthy food that they can eat when they're in a rush. Now, in the first half, Connor, we talked a little bit about the core principles behind what you're doing. Talk a little bit about that, please.
Sure. I like to think about nutrition from a little bit of a bottoms-up perspective, which is to say, okay, if you were to kind of say, what do people want out of their diets? Well, you can kind of you can start with the end in mind. Well, you want to feel good. You want to have enough energy. You want to look good in the sense that your diet should support a healthy body weight. Whatever that is, whether it's for some people losing weight, for other people it's gaining weight, or maintaining it. You'd want to be able to have this diet sustainable such that it doesn't take a lot of extra mental willpower to do it. So this is like a, if you're just doing a diet that feels really, really difficult, that's not mentally sustainable. And then we also want to have it something that we can actually, that can support us in the long run, right? Something that can potentially mitigate things like chronic diseases, and that we can sustain for a long period of time. So, with those said, where we came out with it is okay. Well, there's a few kind of core principles that I have, which are, in a nutshell, they're fundamental, I guess you could say, metabolic like mechanisms that really drive human metabolism. And there's a lot really. Our metabolism is so complex. But if you just kind of zone in on a few of them, one of them is the hormones that we have, right? So this basically goes into your insulin, and glucagon and leptin response that you get from nutrition. And so in general, what we find is that a lot of people on the standard American diet, or probably likely the standard Canadian diet as well, is that when we eat a lot of processed carbs, creates this cycle where you have, you basically are getting insulin spikes all the time, which basically can not only kind of trick your body into storing too much fat, but it can also basically create this almost like addiction cycle where you're just kind of always needing this, carb fix to keep your blood sugar stable. So that's one thing that we want to kind of try to solve for. Then the other thing, of course, is just to make sure that we actually, we're supporting the hormones that make you feel make you feel satiated, that kill hunger for a longer period of time.
Right.
So generally those macronutrients happen. The ones that support those are a combination of fat, protein, and also fiber. So the three of those kind of macronutrients together have been shown to reduce hunger and cravings and increase satiety.
No, that's a real great...
And that's kind of all of a hormonal aspect of things.
That's a real great
so
point. Tell us a little bit what kind of fat you use and you recommend.
Yeah, so generally, there's multiple types of fat. So they can be kind of broken down into saturated fats, monounsaturated, and then polyunsaturated. And polyunsaturated can be kind of broken down into omega-6s and omega-3s. And there's a few other, ones, but they're not as kind of critical, I would say. So in general, what we use is a combination of monounsaturated and saturated fats. And so the reason why is because, first of all, like saturated fats, although, it's gotten a little bit of a bad rap, I think that there's pretty clear evidence that it's really not bad for you. And in fact, it can actually be quite effective and helpful. But we have, and so that comes from coconut oil. We have monounsaturated fats, and the way that we actually have that we derive those is from macadamia nut oil, and then we also have high oleic sunflower oil. Now, some people, and that kind of gets me into the third topic, which is the polyunsaturated omega-6s. So some people are kind of against sunflower or sunflower oil, and usually the reason is because sunflower naturally has a lot of omega-6 fatty acids, and those tend to be the more, I guess you could say, inflammatory types of fatty acids. And so we've used instead high oleic sunflower oil, which actually is very, very low in this kind of inflammatory omega-6, and instead it's higher in monounsaturated fats. And the other thing that I would say is that we wanted to, frankly, to have more omega-3s in the product, but at the same time, that's basically the one thing that is almost impossible for most food companies to put in their product, because those are the DHA that you might get is the thing that kind of makes it taste fishy or it makes it smell basically like you're eating a fish. Yeah. So instead, what I would recommend is that omega-3s are really important, but we should just spend some time getting it from other sources, maybe just eating some wild fish once in a while and getting our omega-3s from those sources instead. You don't need a ton of them, so which is why we didn't feel like it was completely essential that we had to get them into the product. In general, I think it's fair to say that the majority of our fats should come from monounsaturated and saturated fatty acids. So those are the kind of the fats that we have in Ample.
I think that's a very good point to make, because for everybody they should get an omega-3/6 ratio, like Dr. Jaffe said on one of the former podcasts. And yes, it is very hard to get fish oil in a product that's not supposed to taste fishy. And I think
and then also the problem as well is like these omega-6s and 3s tend to be quite unstable.
Yeah.
And so they oxidize quickly and they can go rancid. So, if we're going to deliver the best product to someone, we want to make sure that it's a product that they can take around with them, and it is, naturally shelf stable, right. And we don't have to alter the, inherent qualities of the fats to make us, to make it that it is shelf stable.
Now, that's an important point, too, because most of the traditional fatty acid containing products contain stabilizer that are deteriorating the fats, deodorizing the fats, and making them really worthless for human nutrition, or, as you said, inflammatory. Wow. Now, before we close this show, I would love for you to share your website and how they can get that food and where they can get a nutrition in a bottle.
Sure. So our website is amplemeal.com, amplemeal.com, and that's where you can find all of our products. What I will say is that we currently don't ship to Canada, but we will at some point soon. So it's quite possible that by the time this episode airs on the podcast, we will, and although it'll likely be through Amazon. So
no, that's
we're
excellent.
available on Amazon. You can just very easily just type in Ample on Amazon, and we'll be the first thing that comes up.
Cool.
And I will say as well that we not only have our Ample Original, our Ample K, our keto version, and our vegan version, or our plant-based version, but we also have bulk versions of this product as well. So each of them comes in both the powders in a bottle as well as a bag that you can just scoop out yourself and dole out or and mix with other things, however you would like.
Okay, so that sounds really great. And if somebody is interested in it, by all means, check it out. And we have a lot of listeners in the States too, so you can get it right away. And if you have a depot in the States like we do, you can order it there.
Sounds good.
It really sounds like a very interesting and good nutrition if you know what you're doing and eat it in content with, or concert with the right nutrients. Thanks so much for being on the show today, Connor. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure. And
thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome, and I hope you have good luck with amplemeals.com. And this brings me to the end of today's show. Please don't hesitate to contact me with any questions, thoughts, comments, or suggestions. Or if you'd like to contact Connor, my email here is christine@communityradio.ca, or you can contact me through my website, docchristine.com. And I'm always grateful for any feedback. I also want to extend a special thank you to today's producer, Luke Eddinger. Thank you, Luke. Thank you all for listening to Healthy Alternatives. I'm your host, Dr. Christine Sauer. Tune in next Thursday at noon on 97.5 CIOE-FM Community Radio with live stream on communityradio.ca for the next episode. Goodbye and have a great day.